a person with some questions, because it starts right off by saying, then Joseph could not control himself before all those who stood by him, and he cried. And when I first read that, I thought, what does that mean? Why was Joseph standing there by himself crying? And so you have to really go back in the readings and paint the picture, repaint the picture. We've told the story a number of times, and we have to make that connection, but we have to repaint the picture and remind ourselves why Joseph was standing there so distressed. Well, if you go back in Genesis and read the story, the developing story of Joseph's journey, as we talked last week, he was hated by his brothers. I think you can underline that word hate. It has to be there if you can take your brother and throw him into a pit and hope he dies. But then, to have some foreign folks come along and you sell him to them. And so off he goes. And why was it that they had such feelings for him? As the story goes, his father loved him very much, had a robe for him, and I like the description of the robe. It had sleeves. It's funny how we can build up energy, negative energy, because somebody has a little something more than we do. And that's a picture of life today. But as the story goes on, Joseph was taken off to Egypt, and there his life took on a whole new meaning. One of the things that happened to him, he was able to interpret dreams. Now that's some fun if you want to get in on it. Have somebody tell you about their dreams, and then you feed back to them what you're seeing, whether real or imagined. It's a lot of fun. And the Pharaoh of that time took Joseph in as a leader because he depended so much on him and his ability to interpret his dreams. So he became the ruler, if you will, of Egypt. Well, he might not have had that title. I don't know for sure. I haven't looked that up. But it reminded me, I met a guy out in San Diego that ran Mutual of Omaha. But nobody knew that, because the fellow that owned Mutual of Omaha was retiring, and he wanted his son to be the president. So he put this guy in as his son's assistant. And he ran the company while the son held the position. So there's always somebody out there backing somebody up. And this is what Joseph was doing. He was backing up the Pharaoh, and he was interpreting his dreams, and then he moved into a different place where he had the power of explaining what should be done next, and so on and so forth. So here he is in a very different position than his family. I want to underline that. Than his family thought he would ever be, or even knew him to be. They saw him last in a pit, and then on some kind of an animal being hauled off into the distance. Never, they hoped to see him again. Well, times change, don't they? And a famine came upon the land, and everyone in that area, his brothers and his father included. It doesn't say about how many, anything about his father's many wives, but it does mention the father and the sons. And where do they show up? In Egypt. Well, it must have been a tremendous shock to Joseph when one day his brother Benjamin was standing before him. And I think the way I interpret the scriptures is his brother Benjamin didn't recognize him at Joseph recognized him, and he ran to him, and he hugged him, and he cried, and he called him his brother. He embraced him in a very special way. Something deep was happening there. And then Benjamin get in on it too. He was moved by the moment. And did Joseph say, no, you threw me into a pit, you sold me, you folks go back where you came from and suffer? No, he invited them in to the bounty that he had. And then he said, go get my father, go get my other brothers, and bring them down here. And I will put you up in the land of Goshen. Never stop and think about the land of Goshen. You know, when I was growing up, I gotta think how to say this. The older women in the neighborhood were always saying something was like the land of Goshen. I never knew what they were talking about. But the land of Goshen was a place that was fertile, it was rich, it had opportunity. And he didn't just bring his brothers into Egypt, he took them to Goshen. It was like a county. And he gave them a place where they could raise their cattle and raise their crops and have family and celebrate life together. No animosity, no anger. Just come and be. You're my brother. I would think how often, in fact, in my line of work, the number of families that I meet that are broken because of little things in their life journey that offended them. Where do we get this whole notion of being offended by some little thing? We were taught very young to have a lot of different kinds of emotions. There were certain things that you should be offended by. There were certain things that you should be embarrassed by. There are certain things that you should celebrate. There are certain things that you should cry over. And I know there's probably some of you out there that would like to debate the issue of me saying we learned as we went along what to attach these emotions to. I was reading a study one time that talked about how this child, under the tutelage of his, probably a psychologist's father, because we're always doing things we shouldn't to our kids, and every time there was happiness, he made the child cry. And every time there was tragedy, he got the child to laugh. And pretty soon the kid didn't know whether to laugh or cry. And he cried and laughed by society standards at inappropriate times. Think about that. Emotions. Things that are part of our life journey and where we are. And Benjamin and Joseph put all that they were taught and let the Spirit move them. They wept, it says, on each other's neck. Here it is. And it also describes Joseph as crying so loud that all of Egypt could hear him. Can you picture that? That's got to be a lot of wailing. That's got to be a lot of crying, a lot of tears, but a lot of emotions. Not because of what had happened to him, but because what was happening now, them coming together and celebrating. I often think how many times churches are broken because somebody was offended. And they misdirected their energy in ways that were destructive. If you offend me, I'm going to get back at you. That goes on in families as well. We call them church families. Hopefully we are. I'm sure. I'm lucky because as a member of the family, I can get up and talk to the folks. And they can't talk back. But you stop and think about it.